Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're starting an exciting journey, diving deep into Nursery of the Gods by James Cobban.
Oh,
Over the next several deep dives, we'll be unpacking his theories about reality.
okay.
Think of it, exploring a book that challenges how we understand, reality itself.
Right.
And for this first deep dive, we're focusing on excerpts from the preface and the first chapter,
Okay.
where Cobban introduces this fundamental conflict, the dominance of scientific materialism
Hmm.
and the mystery of consciousness.
Yeah, it's the bold start for sure.
Right.
He jumps right into it, quoting Einstein in the preface.
Mm-hmm.
If at first the idea is not absurd, then there is no help for it.
Oh, I love
It's
that.
like he's inviting us to question everything we think we know.
I love that challenge.
Yeah.
So before we get too deep, let's define materialism.
Sure.
It's a word we hear a lot, but Cobban uses it in a very specific way.
Right. Basically, materialism says that matter and the forces acting upon it are the only things that are real. Everything else, even our thoughts and feelings, are just byproducts of physical processes.
So our rich internal experience, the feeling of being conscious, is reduced to just neurons firing.
Pretty much.
That's kind of a tough pill to swallow, I think.
Yeah, and that's precisely the problem that Cobban points out.
Okay.
This materialistic view is so ingrained not just in science, but in how we see the world. Think about it. If we believe we're just biological machines, separate from nature, doesn't that impact how we treat our environment?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If we don't see ourselves as connected to something larger,
Yeah.
how do we find the motivation to protect it?
Exactly. And this leads us to, I think, the central conflict. Materialism really struggles to explain consciousness.
Yeah.
And Cobban uses Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, to kind of illustrate this. Planck said, and this is a direct quote, "I regard consciousness as fundamental.
What?
I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." That's a huge statement from, a leading scientist, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. That turns the whole thing on its head.
Right.
It's not just some fringe idea either.
Yeah,
Planck is, he's a giant in physics.
absolutely.
What are the implications of that? I mean, if consciousness is fundamental.
Well, it challenges the very foundation of how we understand the world.
Okay.
It suggests that consciousness isn't a product of the brain, but rather the source from which matter itself emerges.
Okay, I can already feel my brain doing backflips.
Yeah.
So how does this connect to the idea of scientific paradigms that Cobban talks about?
Okay, so paradigms are like lenses through which we view the world.
Okay.
They shape what we consider real, what questions are worth asking, and even what counts as valid evidence.
So it's not just about the facts themselves,
Right.
but the framework we use to interpret them.
Exactly. Cobban uses the example of the Necker cube. That optical illusion where a 2D drawing can be perceived as a cube oriented in two different ways,
Yeah.
to illustrate how our perception can shift dramatically, even though the underlying image stays the same.
Oh,
Paradigms can have that same effect on scientific progress.
right.
They can either help us see things in a new light, or they can trap us in old ways of thinking.
Okay.
And that's where those pesky anomalies come in.
Okay.
The things we can't explain away that make us question our neat and tidy understanding.
You mean like those things that make you go, wait, what?
Yeah, like what's going on here?
Yeah, and then you try to find some way to make it fit into what you already believe.
Precisely. Cobban uses the term ad hoc explanations.
Okay.
It's like, trying to patch up a leaky roof with duct tape. It might work temporarily, but it's not a real solution.
Right.
He uses the example of the Ptolemaic model of the universe,
Huh.
where the Earth was considered the center, right? When astronomers observed planets moving backward in the sky,
Yeah.
they invented these complex loops called epicycles to make the observations fit their model.
So instead of questioning the model itself,
Right.
they added more and more complexity to truly make it work.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds kind of like denial.
Exactly. And eventually the whole system becomes so convoluted that it collapses under its own weight.
Wow.
That's what happened with the Ptolemaic model.
Okay.
It took a radical shift in perspective,
Okay.
the Copernican revolution, to break free from that old way of thinking.
So instead of the Earth being the center,
Yeah,
it became clear that we revolve around the sun.
exactly.
That must have been a huge deal at the time.
It challenged a deeply held worldview.
Yeah.
It took decades for the heliocentric model to be widely accepted
Wow.
because it required people to completely change how they saw the universe and our place in it.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that Cobban suggests we might be facing a similar situation today with materialism.
So you're saying that the idea of consciousness being fundamental
Yeah.
could be as groundbreaking as realizing the Earth is not the center of the universe.
It's a bold comparison,
Yeah.
but I think Cobban is onto something. The
Yeah.
more we learn about consciousness,
Yeah.
the more it seems to defy explanation within a purely materialistic framework.
It's like we're seeing those cracks in the foundation that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Those anomalies that point to something beyond our current understanding.
Precisely. And those anomalies, those glitches in the matrix,
Okay.
are what Cobban sees as potential evidence for a more fundamental role for consciousness.
Okay.
They can't be easily dismissed as, ad hoc explanations or experimental errors.
Right.
They challenge us to consider the possibility that our current paradigm, our current map of reality, is incomplete.
So are there specific anomalies that Cobban highlights as being particularly compelling?
Yes, and that's what we'll be exploring in future deep dives. He delves into a range of phenomena, from near-death experiences to psychic abilities to the placebo effect.
Wow.
These are experiences that challenge the boundaries of what we think is possible.
That's what I love about the deep dive.
Yeah,
Really pushing the boundaries of our understanding.
absolutely.
I'm ready to have my mind blown.
Yeah.
So we've explored this concept of scientific materialism.
Right.
What's the alternative?
Yeah.
If materialism is like the Ptolemaic model,
Yeah.
is there a Copernican model for consciousness waiting to be discovered?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's precisely what Cobban sets out to explore in Nursery of the Gods.
Okay.
He suggests that maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
consciousness is not a product of the brain, but a fundamental aspect of reality.
Right.
Perhaps even the primary force from which everything else emerges.
Wow. That's like flipping that Necker cube, seeing the universe from a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Thinking back to that Planck quote, he did say matter was derivatives, not the other way around.
Right, and that's why Cobban's work is so important.
Yeah.
He's not just presenting another theory.
Right.
He's inviting us to question the very framework through which we view the world.
Okay.
He's asking us to consider the possibility that our current understanding of reality might be as limited as the Ptolemaic model of the universe.
So where do we go from here? What can we, the listeners, take away from this exploration?
Well,
Especially knowing this is just, the first chapter.
yeah, for me, the key takeaway is the importance of being open to new possibilities.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our current paradigms, our current maps of reality,
Yeah.
are not the territory itself.
Right.
They are simply tools that can be helpful, but also limiting.
It's like that saying, if your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Exactly. We need to be willing to expand our toolkit,
Okay.
to consider different ways of seeing and understanding the world.
And maybe even be willing to create our own tools, our own maps.
Yeah.
Based on our own experiences and observations.
Absolutely.
It is like Cobban is urging us to be more like Copernicus
Yeah.
than those adding epicycles, right?
Precisely. To not be afraid to challenge the status quo, to ask those absurd questions.
Right.
That might just lead to a profound shift in our understanding of ourselves and the universe.
This has been an incredible start to our deep dive into Nursery of the Gods.
It has.
It's clear that we're in for a wild ride.
For sure.
And I, for one, am buckled up and ready.
Me too. I'm excited to see where Cobban takes us next.
Join us next time as we delve deeper into Cobban's critique of the 5 axioms of materialism,
Okay.
exploring those cracks in the foundation that might just open up a whole new way of seeing reality.